Hello, buddy.
Hello.
All right, what's up?
I don't know, what's up with you?
Nothing much. I just got home from a interesting vacation, and now I'm here, and we're talking.
Cool. I don't know, do you want to start or?
Why? Well, no, I guess you can start. Lay out the position.
Oh, okay. So basically, I guess, should I just start with what happened, kind of?
Yeah, sure.
Okay, I've sort of been watching your videos for a while, and I noticed a few things that you said about autism, and specifically the one I was kind of focused on was when you said, that autism is generally a negative thing, and the people who have it consider it, a negative thing, and you, said, I'm probably gonna get in shit for that and stuff,
Oh
and
wait, I
so,
don't know. I don't know if the people that have it normally consider it a negative thing. I don't know enough about autistic culture, or
okay.
autism culture. I'm not too sure about that one, but but yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
I would consider it. I would consider it. I would use the term. Are you familiar with the term like strictly worse?
No.
So the idea is that basically, if you have something and then you do something to it, it becomes worse in every conceivable way. So it's something strictly worse than something else. Not like a pros and cons, but like just something that ends up being worse off is how I would kind of view it.
Oh, well, I wouldn't use that to describe autism at all, but
Okay.
I do have autism for anyone who probably hasn't guessed yet, though you probably have
Uh huh.
based on I don't know. But anyway, yeah, I think maybe if you ask people with autism if they wanted to take a cure for it or something,
Mm-hmm.
I think maybe one or two people would genuinely want to because it affects their life or something. But I think 99% of the people who say they want to take a cure, it's because it's not the autism itself that's a problem, it's how people react to you. Know what I mean?
So I guess I can. I understand what you're saying. So like I could draw a comparison between this and we'll say it's not the same thing at all, but just for comparison's sake, like homosexuality, right? So
Okay, yeah,
somebody
that's
might say
fair.
that like I'm homosexual, but I really wish I wasn't homosexual, right? Well, why do you think that? It's not because they really don't like men or they really wish they were straight. It's just that the societal stigma is so bad that they just wish they didn't have to deal with it, right? Is that kind of the argument?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. It's just you sort of your whole life, you're sort of used to people telling you that your way of thinking is wrong and everything about you is wrong, and why can't you just be normal? And then you're like, oh, why can't you just be autistic? I was born the way I was born, so you can't change that, and so we should just sort of learn to get along. And I mean, even if we could, I wouldn't take a cure. Me personally, I wouldn't, because I
Mm-hmm.
think, I don't know, I think there's a lot of benefits to it. I don't know, what's your view of autism? What do you think it sort of is?
So the autism that I'm most familiar with, and I know there are different levels of it, but would be autism that basically severely impairs social abilities. I guess I had an employee at the casino once who had Asperger's, so that I don't know if that's still a diagnosis they give anymore, but that's what I kind of became most familiar with. Basically, somebody that has a very difficult time empathizing with other people, and as a result, they can either tell inappropriate jokes or talk for too long or ignore somebody else or have difficulty maintaining eye contact. Stuff like that is what I'm most familiar with.
Yeah, that's somewhat true. The Asperger's thing, so basically, I'm kind of new to the medical stuff too. I mean, I've had autism my whole life, but I only was diagnosed recently,
Mm-hmm.
and I've been attending support groups recently and sort of learning about other people who have it. So basically, you're not too far off from the thing with the Asperger's, but Asperger's is now technically not a thing really. It's considered
Yeah.
part of autism spectrum disorder,
Yeah,
but
ASD. Yeah, yeah. I'm
um,
aware of that. They don't really
yeah.
diagnose people as having Asperger's anymore. Yeah,
Yeah,
that's yeah.
there's some people who have or had what was considered Asperger, and I would be one of those people, right? But
Mm-hmm.
and they sort of had this objection to it because they didn't want to be lumped in with all the people who were silent or really made no eye contact or rocked
Or
back
were
and
like
forth and had severe
severely
problems.
socially impaired,
Yeah,
such that they act out, can be violent or whatever.
yeah.
Yeah, I know that there are different.
Because the thing about being on a spectrum is that when there's such a big diversity of people in it, you're going to get associated with things you're not, and so it's kind of a problem. But with the empathy thing, pretty much any commonplace pop culture knowledge of Asperger's, they kind of have it right, but they also kind of don't. I can empathize with people, I do feel sad and I do understand things, but the thing you said about making inappropriate jokes, I used to sort of do that a lot, and I still kind of do sometimes, but in my head, sometimes, I've said some really dumb shit at bad times, but I apologize for it and I try to sort of be better. But the thing in my head is when I make one of those jokes, I sort of go through like, okay, I know this is something that probably wouldn't be acceptable in this case, but I think it's too funny not to say, and that's kind of like, I should be taking people's feelings into account more, and I acknowledge that, and so I've improved in that area over the years. So
I guess like the only thing is that like or I guess in terms of like how I evaluate it, where I come to the strictly negative thing is that it just seems like autism essentially gives you additional difficulties that you have to work through, and it's not like you really get anything beneficial for having to work through them. Like you have to work harder to. This sounds really offensive. But like you have to work harder to function like every other normal human being. Is kind of what I would say.
I say that's partly fair, but it's also partly like, I mean, I understand where you're coming from, and I think it's totally like legitimate in some ways, but there's like different types of autism and different types of like struggles, and for me it's not like a crippling thing. Like I'm high functioning, I guess, if you want to like use that term, and so like sure. There's things I can do and there's things that I like have trouble with, but it's not like I can't do them. It's just like it's really uncomfortable. Like, okay, so imagine you I don't know, what's the hard thing to do? Okay, like if you were to put a staple in your hand, right?
Okay.
Like, that's not a pleasant thing, I assume. I have never tried it, but I assume it would not be pleasant to staple your own hand.
Sure, yeah.
So for me, like, certain things that you have to do, it sort of feels like a staple to the hand, but I think people who, like, don't have autism, they sometimes don't understand, like, they're like, oh, why can't you just, like, touch the things in like, I don't like the dishwasher. It makes me sick. It's really gross. Okay. But that's like I can work with it, but it just grosses me out. It's like stapling your hand. Like you can do it, but it's going to cause you like some grief, and you can kind of get over that. Like you can develop a callus on your hand for the staple analogy, but
yeah, and I don't disagree. So like, let me be clear on my statements, right? Because I understand that a lot of different people make these different statements with different intentions. I don't think that autistic people should be like shunned from society or are like less than human or any kind of like very extreme statement like that. I just think that just being autistic is generally negative. So in the course of this conversation, you've talked to me about some of the negative ways that autism manifests in your life. Why, if you had the opportunity to not have it at all, why wouldn't you go that route?
Well, because I guess it's a part of me, and like I kind of value it, and like it does allow me to come up with creative things. Like I kind of think differently from a lot of people, and so I can like, and all the stuff I come up with, you could argue whether it's valuable or not, like the stories I write and all the creativity stuff. And it used to be like a requirement that for Asperger's you had to like be creative, but they took that out of the diagnosis recently, I'm told. But I do sort of find that I have interesting, like, I don't know. I don't like to say nice things about myself, because if I do, people will just, because you can look at yourself in the mirror and you can see things, but you're only seeing it from your point of view, so you can kind of go by what other people say. And so like some people have told me that I'm smart or that I'm creative, and then there's people who tell me I'm a filthy subhuman, I should die, and
kind of
stuff
extreme,
like that.
Right.
Yeah, it is extreme, and do you
think you would lose like your creativity if you weren't autistic? Do you genuinely believe that?
That's what I was kind of wondering, because the thing with autism is it's like it's hard to tell how much is your personality without it and how much is it, because you've had it all your life, so how are you supposed to know any different? Like, I mean, it's like if I said, if all of a sudden I made you a woman, or if I changed your race, or if I did like something to change you in a way where society would perceive you differently and maybe you would think differently, like like how much of you do you think would stay?
Sure. I mean, I definitely understand what you're saying. I think the gender thing is comparable. Like, if I were to be transformed into a woman, how much of my personality is a result of me being a man, right? Can I ever really say that statement? Right.
Yeah,
it's kind of what you're saying.
It's kind of hard to say, and like, again, since it's a spectrum thing, it's really hard to see like what's part of it and what's not. Like, I was sort of using sorry, I can't talk. I was using an example with someone the other day where like the criteria for diagnosis, it's kind of vague and stuff, and then you get these stereotypes where people say like, oh well, if you like Lion King you must be autistic, and you know what, I do like Lion King, and I know autistic people who like Lion King, but I know neurotypicals who like Lion King as well, so it's like it could be because of the autism, but it also couldn't be, and there's no way of really telling.
What's the connection between autism and...
I don't know. I think maybe it's just like, because I have no scientific explanation for it, but I think cartoons are somehow more appealing, maybe because they're more artistic or creative or something, and animals, it's easier to relate to animals because they aren't as deceptive as people generally. Like, they won't make faces that are, well, usually, like, I mean, some animals can lie, but they won't, like, a cat, if it's hissing, it's not gonna actually be happy. If it's hissing, it hates you and you know it and you can back away.
Basically,
But
the
with
social
people,
interaction is much more straightforward, is kind of what
yeah,
you're saying, right? Okay.
like I can sort of read people. Like I do have trouble sometimes, but I'm not as severe as some people. Like I know some people who just like they genuinely can't tell when they're being lied to or when they're being deceived. And sometimes, when I'm being deceived, I know I'm being deceived, but I still play along because I kind of want to fit in and not cause trouble, which is awful, but it happens.
Sure. I guess, like, I don't know, are you familiar with deaf culture?
No, I'm not familiar with a lot of things.
Would you consider being deaf as like a strictly negative thing? Like if there was a cure for deafness, do you think that you would take it, or if you were deaf, would you want to remain deaf forever?
I don't know. I think it depends on the person. Like, I mean, because if you look at some people who have taken ways in which they're disadvantaged and like they use it in a way where it's creative or they can create, art or something, and it's like from their own unique perspective where they wouldn't get it if they were cured of what they have. But then, there's people who genuinely can't, like I'm not one of the people who sort of like rocks back and forth and like can't talk and stuff like that. And I don't know if they'd want to cure themselves because I'm not like, and obviously not every one of them would agree on it. But the way I am, I can function enough where like I'm fine. But I wouldn't want to lose the things that make me myself.
Yeah, I mean, I understand that. I understand that type of thinking. Like, I understand your point really well. I'm just not sure if I agree with it. So I guess, like, in terms of evaluating on whether or not it should be cured or not, right? If we're taking somebody into their 30s or 40s or 20s or whatever, whose autism has been like a significant part of their life, and they've kind of built their life around that, I can understand that. Would you make these same arguments though? Let's say somebody is like just born. Let's say that you have a newborn child and you have the ability to quote unquote cure them of their autism, right? Of they're completely no longer ASD completely. Would you be like in favor of something like that, or would you be opposed to something like that?
Oh, that's a thing where like I've never been asked that question before, but I would be sort of wanting to say that in this case you would probably want to wait until they have a choice to do it. Like I don't want to compare it to circumcision, but like something where like they can have the choice because it's like if when someone's a baby and you sort of do stuff to them and then you sort of grow up and you realize like hey like my dad his mother put him on the what you would call it, like oven thing, and his diaper like melted to his butt because like she was kind of incompetent at that point. And so like all these things happen to you when you're a baby, and like I don't know if he has like a scar on his butt, but like I feel like curing autism might be a kind of scar where like they might be okay with it, but they might not. But I guess if you do it, they'll like know no other way. So that's a complicated question.
So I guess like my problem is that like let's say that we take something that we can both agree is probably strictly negative, like an amputation, right? If you're losing a limb, can you agree that that's probably something that's almost always a negative?
Well, I don't know. Like, there's that guy who is a cartoonist who can't use his arms or his legs or something, and he like draws with his mouth and he comes up with these really creative things. So like, I don't know. It's all how you look at it, but I guess that's sort of more negative than not.
Sure. So that's kind of what I'm getting into. Like,
yeah.
So like, let's say that you do have people that are missing limbs or whatever, but have been able to turn that around into like some great empowering thing, and they developed a lifestyle that they wouldn't have had otherwise, right? Just because somebody's able to do that, I don't know if that necessarily means that in every case then we should promote that or try or avoiding it, if that makes sense. Like, let's say that there's going to be a child and I know that he's going to be born without legs, right? And let's say we have the ability to pop a pill in the mother or something like that, right? And we can instantly cure it, right? In this scenario, would it be right for an artist who is missing his legs, who's made great strides in art, using only his hands and maybe he paints with the bottom half of his body, right? Would it be right for him to tell that child, no, I don't think we should push for a cure actually, because I was able to take what is most likely a disability and turn it into something advantageous? I think everybody should have to do that. Do you think that's a fair kind of assessment to make?
Well, I don't think it's right for anyone to sort of force those beliefs. So the thing is, like, with a parent who would sort of like make the choice of curing them or not, and the artist who is doing the thing who says like don't cure them, like I don't think the artist or the parent is right in this situation. I think you should maybe give the child a choice, though. Like I don't know, I guess it depends on the situation. So,
Well, sure, but it seems like for giving the choice, it almost becomes self-fulfilling, right? Because if you wait until they're 18 and their autism has already been kind of like a big part of them, do they ever really have so I'll take it even like one step further, and I understand that this comparison is very different. Like, say you take somebody with Down syndrome, right? And I understand that Down syndrome is very different than autism, except for maybe at the most extreme parts of the autistic spectrum, right? With somebody with Down syndrome that might be 18, 19, 20, 25 years old, maybe he doesn't think that he wants to be like everybody else. Maybe he has kind of come into being, somebody with Down syndrome, and he's learned to live his life that way. Is it fair that that person is like that now forever when he could have been cured as a child because you wanted to give them a chance? Do they really, and it sounds kind of degrading, but do they really have can anybody really imagine what it would be like to be a completely different person and then make that decision at a later point in life?
Like I don't know, because it feels like if you're going to be born as a certain person, then you can live your life as that certain person because that's you. So like if you change that before you're born, like you won't know any differently. But like, I mean, I feel like I've had a pretty great life. I mean, like, there's been definitely some challenges and some terrible things that have happened and stuff, but I feel like going through that pain has kind of helped me in certain ways, though I would rather not have had all that, stuff, but I wouldn't want to change who I am. So I guess it really does depend on the person, and it's like, it's not an easy question. And, it's like, I don't know, like X-Men, where, like, on the autism spectrum, you could be this blue guy with big feet walking on the walls and stuff, or you could just be some guy who happens to shoot quills out once in a while, but really you wouldn't be able to tell the difference. So like, I don't know, it's just there's such a variation.
Yeah, I guess like that's kind of the problem that I have, is it seems like because some people are able to overcome it, like there are people that have Down syndrome, or I'm sorry, not Down syndrome, that have autism that do have significant difficulties in life, right? That
Yeah, but then you look at people like Einstein and like Stanley Kubrick, and like this is speculation, but it's like,
Sure, but is it really so like, okay, so we'll dig into the anecdotes. I'll use myself as a personal example, right? Because of the way that I grew up, I was very detached from my parents from a very early age, and such that at 15 and 16, I no longer lived with them. I've been pretty independent all of my life. As a result of that independence, I've gained a great deal of further independence, right? I can live on my own. I do my own finances. It's benefited me a lot insofar as my career goes. I'm a very independently minded person. I can take abuse from a lot of people without feeling bad about it because I don't seek like affirmation from people, right? I consider this to be one of my greatest assets. Now,
happy birthday,
that
Destiny.
being said,
cool.
Because it worked out personally for me, I don't know if I would take that a step farther and encourage every single parent to neglect their children past, like age 10. Because it doesn't work out.
Yeah, definitely. Like, I'm not pushing for that. Like I said, the artist in the other example, he's not right for doing that. But I don't know. It's a hard question. But I know for me personally, like, I think some of the stigma too for like autism should sort of dissipate a bit, because people are sort of thinking that I'm going to be this like person who bangs her head against the wall and like screeches. I don't screech. That's the thing I've never seen anyone do.
One of the I have one of the really negative things about that is that I think that I don't really like the labeling of ASD. I don't know why they do it that way. I'm not in a position to question it, but it does seem strange to me that like there are a lot of people that have autism I won't say you, but like a lot of people wouldn't even realize it, right? Because they're so good at that, they have thought about it a lot. They've managed their conditions or whatnot, such that the average person can't even tell that they can't even tell that this person has autism, right? But there are also people that have autism to such an extent that they are like that. They're screechy, they're violent, they can't even live on their own. They need caretakers for their entire life.
Yeah, that's true, and I understand. But I don't know, I feel like, oh god, I totally forgot what I was gonna say. People have told me before, they're like, oh my god, I had no idea you had autism. I thought you were just weird. I'm like, I am just weird, but I also have autism. Like, there's an explanation now.
Yeah. I guess I'm really uncomfortable with the idea that because somebody has kind of like overcome what you admit is a difficulty, you think that same difficulty should be imposed on everybody, even if they had the opportunity to.
I don't think it should be imposed. I just think like.
Well, because like effectively, that's kind of what happens if you have the ability to say quote unquote cure it, but then you say, well, no, we'll let them decide later. You're kind of imposing on them. You're saying like, okay, well now you need to suffer from autism for some amount of years, and then we'll see. Hopefully you like it,
Maybe. Like, I understand the logic behind that, but I know if someone, like, I guess I wouldn't know any differently if someone had cured me, but, like, I don't know. It sort of becomes an issue of, like, should we love ourselves for who we are? Or should we try to change ourselves or change our children so that they better fit in with society? Or should society sort of be better where there
Autismos
wouldn't
unite.
have to be a struggle in the first place?
Well, like, I kind of understand that, but the problem isn't just like I don't think the problem is just that if you're autistic, you have society gives you troubles. Like, autism gives you real difficulty, right? Like your ability to empathize with people is something that's genuinely compromised if you're an autistic person, right?
Not well, no, not really. And I think that's again, it's just like a societal thing. Like if I've talked to people sometimes, and people in my support group, they say, you do have to sort of tell people how some. Okay, so like there's this guy who is like sort of comparable. He had big feet and he had like shoes. Whenever he went to the shoe store, he'd be like, what do you have in my size? And they'd be like, okay, well, what style are you looking for? It's like, no, I don't think you understand. My feet are huge. There's only going to be like 2 pairs of shoes. Just bring those ones out. So, you have to sort of warn people what's going to happen with you. Like,
Yeah, and this is like a negative thing, right? This
no,
process of
no, I wouldn't say so. I'd say it's just like a personal thing. Like, I mean,
if the average
yeah,
person had the opportunity between having to warn somebody about a potential thing versus just kind of functioning the same as everybody else, you think the average person would want to opt for that, having to warn people?
I don't know. I don't know what normal people think. Like, I mean, there's a lot of overlap, but then, you can never know what other people are thinking.
No, but I think it's fair to make assumptions sometimes. Like, I think that most
Yeah,
people in
I guess
general
so.
want to be able to function like the average person in an environment. Like, I think that's a fair statement to say. I
Oh,
would,
no, I wouldn't want to sort of function like the average person, but maybe that's just because I've kind of been put down by some average people.
yeah, no,
I'm not saying all average people are bad. I'm just saying, like, I don't know, I feel like there's something nice in being able to think differently from other people and see solutions and like different things that they may not have noticed.
Yeah, and I can understand that, but like I guess like the big thing that I would like caution, I guess, is it sounds like it kind of sounds like you're making the argument like because you overcame something, like everybody maybe can do it in the same way. So like another example that I could give would be antidepressants. A lot of the arguments that you're making right now for people being autistic would be similar arguments that people would make for people never going on antidepressants. Somebody would say, like, well, I feel like I can't deal with, being depressed. My things are fucked and I need to deal with this. And somebody might say, well, listen, you're beautiful the way you are. I think you should accept this and you should just try to function as a normal human being and don't take antidepressants. It'll change who you are, right? Like these are a lot of arguments that people give or deal with when they're contemplating going on antidepressants or not.
Yeah, I understand that, but I do think like I understand that there's a lot of autistic people who like have troubles with speech and all that stuff, but I feel like there's also a significant portion that are like high functioning and like the autism helps them in some respects, and that's how I feel, and that's how a lot of the people in my support group feel, and that's how like, and I understand it's really hard, and especially with this like, I mean, if there was a way where like sort of low functioning autism was like classified separately, like it sounds kind of elitist, and it is, but if it was classified separately from what was called Asperger's, like it would be a lot easier because then you could say, well, people with Asperger's, like they may succeed more than like, but even then that's not a guaranteed thing. But I think that is partly like a societal thing, maybe.
Well, so like when you keep saying societal thing, I don't know if I necessarily disagree with that. Like if you're autistic, you genuinely have difficulties like empathizing with people, right? That's like a biological.
No,
for,
not
for
really.
like Asperger's, isn't that like
No, I mean, like it happens with some people, but again, it's kind of like a misinterpretation where like sometimes you don't understand, like I don't know, because I definitely have empathy for people. Like I get emotional over things, and I like cry, and I like feel bad when people's family members die, and I feel, but
Sure.
then there's
So this is my understanding, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, right? So humans have certain ways of doing things that are almost, you could call them biological or natural responses. So for instance, everybody in every culture laughs and cries, right? And
Yes.
these are cues that children pick up on, infants pick up on, right? Not because they've learned them, but because they're like biologically ingrained in them, right? So when you're talking about somebody having autism and them not being able to like, I'm not saying that you can't like intellectually empathize with something. I'm saying that like that thing where you can look at somebody's eyes and understand intrinsically, like naturally, like what they're feeling without having to think about it. That's something that impacts people with Asperger's, right? That's like one of their big problems,
Yeah.
right? Yeah.
I'd say on that end of the spectrum, I kind of like, I don't have that much difficulty with it. I think like fictional media helps me with that a lot because it's easier to sort of interact with people who don't shout insults back at you, and so you can kind of learn to understand them a bit.
Yeah,
But
yeah, but again, like what you're doing, you're talking about training that you have to do to overcome something that
yeah,
most people
well,
kind of just
kind
have
of.
naturally.
But I mean, it's also like, okay, so there's the famous example of the empathy thing where like if you show a kid with autism like you put, I don't know, give me an object. What's an object?
Tree.
Well, that's kind of big, but anyway, if you put a small tree in a box and you say to them, "Did you see me put the small tree in the box?" And they're like, "Yeah." And then they bring someone else into the room who didn't see the tree, and then they're like, "So what do you think this person will see in the box?" And they're like, "Oh, well, they know it's a tree because I know it's a tree." So that's like sort of like less of a high functioning thing. Like I don't have that as much, but once in a while I will slip up on little things, but I don't think that I slip up that much more than regular people. I mean, I could be wrong because, autism, but
Yeah, I mean, I kind of understand. I guess just the main thing that makes me uncomfortable is it seems like there are things you have to overcome, and not everybody on top of, because life can be pretty hard on its own without having autism, right, or other things to overcome. I guess I'm just a little uncomfortable, kind of saying that every single person, because one person got through it well, that every single person should be okay with having to go through those struggles, like if
well,
they're
I don't think
avoidable.
every single person should be okay with having to go through it. But you know what? There's always going to be something that you hate about yourself and that you have to like struggle to improve. Like if you're like quick to judge, or if you're sort of gossipy, or like everyone has problems and you want to sort of work through those problems or embrace them in a way that is productive and doesn't harm anyone. So I feel like
Yeah,
even if
again,
some
and I
problems are more significant, like
I agree
I
with that,
mean,
but
it's
like you wouldn't say this to somebody with like if you had a child who was going to be born without legs, and then they're born and they're like, "Mom and Dad, why the fuck didn't you give me legs if you had the ability to do so?" And you're like, "Well, listen, like everybody has problems in life. I don't think that giving you legs would get rid of all your
Well, I
problems."
don't
So
know. Like, if my kid was born without legs, they wouldn't have known anything different. I would just say, like, you don't have legs, but that's who you are. And if you want to change that, that's fine. But, don't ever think that you're less because you have this disability.
I guess I mean I'm uncomfortable using the word less, but it just seems like something that makes things strictly harder. Like I don't know.
Less capable, then.
Yeah, sure. Well, but I mean
If
you
that's
are less
okay.
capable, right? Because you can't
No,
walk.
well, I mean, in certain respects, but the thing with, like, quote unquote Asperger's is that you're really good at something, generally. You're really good at some things, but then really bad at other things.
Well,
So when you do, like, an IQ
I don't think
test, it's like,
that's I don't think that's necessarily true, right? You're talking about like autistic
oh.
savants. I don't think that savantness is present in most. That's a very rare thing.
No, well, I mean, that is sort of like a thing about Asperger's where like you can be really, really good at specific and like maybe not all that interesting things, but then in other realms you're not that great. So it's like I don't know, like a skill slider or something.
I I I I don't think I agree with that. But I mean we're
Well,
gonna have to like
that's
go through.
my experience and my experience with the people I know. So like I know there's people who obviously don't fit this, but I mean like that's the thing is I guess we're kind of coming to the argument where is it fair to sort of cater to the people who struggle more or to the people who don't? And I think, maybe the answer is that we should help the people who struggle and the people who are okay with it, like, just embrace them and not like discriminate or anything.
Well, yeah, I mean, I'm always for that. I don't think we should discriminate against anything. It's just a difference of like, is it worth finding a cure for or viewing as something that needs to be cured? I guess is kind of
Well, I guess it's again, it's like the mutant thing where like you can have a cure, but not everyone should take it and not everyone should not take it.
sure. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Do you have anything else you want to talk about, or anything in regards to this? Or
I don't know. I probably should tell you, like, it doesn't really matter, but I kind of like one of the reasons that this started was because I watched someone's video and somehow I got to thinking about the whole JonTron thing, and then I watched the video with you and him, and then I sort of talked about the JonTron thing in a crappy little video on my channel that like got 34 views because nobody cares, which is fine. It's fine. I'm glad that nobody cares because nobody can call me names, but and I did sort of bring up your name when I said at the end of the stream, you sort of used a few slurs,
oh, I use
kind of.
autistic as a slur. Yeah, I probably shouldn't do that, but yeah, I do that. I do that quite a bit. Yeah.
Yeah, I think, like, I don't know, you seem like a nice guy, but I feel like maybe that's borderline, maybe you should stop.
Yeah,
Like, I don't want to
probably.
tell you to stop. Like, I want you to make the decision on your own, but, like, Because you know, not everyone will get offended by a slur, but then there are people who do, and then it sort of like has this negative connotation, and it makes people think, well, obviously autism is bad, and then it's all like stupid people who like, and you know, it's kind of that stuff. I
No,
don't know.
yeah, I understand. I don't disagree with you.
I think, and you know, like I do have limits. Like people who say you shouldn't use the word moron or idiot or stupid. I'm like, no, you know what? Those are so ingrained and they've become distanced from what they originally meant. And you know, something like retarded is a gray area. I don't really like it, but if people are just kind of like they don't get it, it's fine, you know. But maybe they should stop. I mean, it's like pointing out someone who has spinach in their teeth. You just kind of say, you know, maybe you should not embarrass yourself. Like that seems a little bit too harsh, even because I think it's just so ingrained into people, and I don't want to be one of those people who tells the normies what to do, but like it does hurt sometimes.
Yeah, no, I understand. I don't think you should be ashamed or scared of telling people how you feel either. I think that's a good thing, probably.
No, and I don't know. I just it feels kind of hard because a lot of normal people they won't understand what it's like to have what you are made into this thing that like is so negative and like and they're like, well, you could just ignore it or just laugh with us. And you know, some people are able to do that. I find with myself, it just like I want to like myself, and generally I do, but there's times when I don't like myself, and it's made harder when people are constantly telling me, like, no, you won't amount to anything because of what you have.
Sure.
Which, you know, it could be true, but I haven't done anything with my life so far, so.
You're not going to school or anything?
Oh, I am going to school, and I'm, like, writing things and, like, trying to animate and doing all these things, but.
Well, there you go, dude. You're on the journey. You're on the path.
Yeah, I don't know. I feel just because views have sort of dipped down recently on the things that I write, and it's just like, you know, it's hard when you're getting like 34 views a video, or like when you're writing and you get like 5 people and none of them comment and tell you how to improve or anything. And then one person for some reason leaves a comment on your work that's like talking about something. I got this really weird thing. I think it might just be a troll, but he was like talking about the philosophy of nothing exists. And I'm like, this is a Land Before Time fan fiction, speaking of autism. And like, what the fuck are you talking about?
Gotcha.
And that's coming from
Interesting.
me, so.
Huh.
Anyway, I don't know.
All right, well, do you have any final closing thoughts you'd like to leave the stream with?
Maybe just one where it's like I understand people like to make jokes and stuff. And, you know, to some degree I do too. Like I like to laugh at myself. I like to laugh at everything. But there are some times when laughter is not worth like the pain of others.
Yeah, I
And
probably agree.
it depends. It depends.
Mm-hmm.
And it also depends on the person. Like there's some friends who can get away with a lot with me and I can get away with a lot with them.
But typically because you know them first, right?
Yeah.
It's not like a
Like I mean,
stranger.
if a stranger comes up to you and tells you how you're kind of like, even if they're joking, it's you have to sort of wonder if they do have a bias.
Mm-hmm.
So anyway, yeah.
All right, well, hey, I appreciate the conversation. I know talking about these things, especially if they personally affect you, can take a lot of courage, so.
Yeah, thank you very much for having me on. Like, not a lot of people are willing to listen to this kind of stuff.
All right, well, hey, I really appreciate you coming on.
Thank you.
All right, have a good one.
You too.